outcome of change management isn't happiness, right? It's accepting how things are. And one of my personal mantras is this relationship between, it's a formula that I use, and satisfaction is equal to expectations over actuals. So if we spend a lot of time managing expectations for change, this is a truism that like today is the slowest pace and volume that change will ever be. So when we talk about change management, it's mostly about enabling the recognition of how things are and how they will likely be. This notion of enabling crew to control the controllable.
You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So excited to have you on the Modern People Leader, Jon. You are the second to last podcast recording in 2025. We've got one more internal pod that we're going to record, but consider yourself the last like true guest, classic guest interview that we're going to do for the year.
I'm honored.
And so we have a lot we want to talk to you about, but before we can get into the main conversation, we have a few rituals at the Modern People Leader. One is what we call good news stories. It's just a way to start things off with some positivity. And, I was joking before this that we've recorded multiple episodes this week. So that it can be hard to come up with a fresh good news story, sure. But it's the end of the year. So we should be reflective and have a lot of good news to pull from. So we like to start with our guests first. So we'll hand over to you.
So I think probably there's one, if I can share, on the professional side and one on the personal side. On the professional side, at Vanguard, the way our performance management and comp system works is as we head into the last couple weeks of the year, we are completely done with all things performance review, compensation, reviews delivered, compensation shared. And so when folks go into the end of the year holidays, there's no coming back in January with like this huge heavy load where you spend the first quarter of the year dealing with, comp and performance management. So that's definitely on the professional side, a huge good news story, and super proud of our global HR crew for making that happen in a really effective way. On the personal side, so I just moved into a new home here in the Pennsylvania area, and that I'm a home person. I love it, and I am super excited to spend a big piece of the next couple weeks basically nesting.
Yes.
What are your stories?
Daniel? Yeah. Daniel, what do you have?
I'm going to go personal. So yesterday was my mom's birthday, and my mom, Belinda, she's like day one listener before anybody was listening to the podcast. And we had extra MPL sweaters coming out of our event last week. And so I brought her an MPL sweater to dinner last night. And this morning I saw her and she was very pumped. She was like, "It fits me. I'm already washing it. I'm going to wear it all the time." And so that's my good news. We officially got my mom, Belinda, MPL swag, and she's been asking for it for years.
Belinda is OG MPL.
100%. 1,000%. 1,000. And still to this day, will give us feedback if like we change something or our rhythm is off. She'll let Daniel know. If she also like gives us great feedback on our guests from time to time.
I would love to hear from Belinda, like on how this goes.
We will definitely get feedback for you. All right. I'm going to go business. We had our second to last L10. And for those that listen to the show, know that we're big nerds on Traction EOS. It's like a business management system with meeting rhythms, etc., kind of like Rockefeller habits. So we use Traction and we do these L10s. We do it in a way that works for us. We're not as rigorous as probably we should, but we had two more. We had two left. We had our second earlier, and we basically locked down our events lineup for 2026. And I have been exhausted since our last event of the year, which was last week, and we crushed it. Events is my line of business. Nice. We absolutely killed it. And so we're expanding from 4 events, 4 formal, like all in, we probably had like 6 to 8 to 12 next year. And we're going to have a much more structured calendar. We're going to be combining some of the different events that we had or we tested into a single brand. So we have a lot of exciting news coming down the pipeline on events.
Very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And so enough about us. I call this a Brene Brown question, John. What's your story? Like, how did you get into HR? What was the journey, the trials and tribulations that you encountered across your career? And ultimately, how did you become the CHRO at Vanguard?
All right. Well, I will try to keep this crisp, and then we can go wherever both of you want to go. But the headline story is I grew up in Las Vegas, one of the few and the proud. And after high school, I went right into the United States Air Force, where I served for 8 years. My vocation in the military was a firefighter. And so, noble profession. I had the opportunity to live and work in Germany and Turkey. It was a fantastic early career experience. But one of the things I learned from that experience is that I was not passionate about being a firefighter. It's a great job, but it wasn't me. But while I was a firefighter, I had the opportunity to work with department training officer at kind of revising the whole training program. And one of the things that's really great about the military is they would never ask you to do something they don't train you on. And so I learned a lot about how people learn and work, and that kind of lit me up. And so after 8 years, I got out. I've worked in a few different industries: government, Department of Defense and energy contracting. I've worked in the software industry. But in 2004, I made the conversion into financial services as head of HR for a publicly traded top 10 bank. And ever since then have been in mostly banking, but also diversified financial services like retirement planning, insurance, et cetera. And had the opportunity to join Vanguard late last year. I just clicked over my first year anniversary, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Well, congrats on 1 year. And I feel like most people are familiar with Vanguard, but for the few that aren't, how would you describe what you guys do to a stranger?
Yeah, I think so. We are first and foremost an investment firm, and we are incredibly mission driven to provide as many investors as possible with the highest probability of financial success. And we do that by having a long-term investment strategy, having high-performing investment products, and delivering those products at absolute rock bottom prices. And if you look at the long arc of time, all of the data available says that if you very simply save as much money as you can, invest it in with a long-term view, don't look at your retirement account. When you get to a later part in your life when you're ready to retire, if you invest in a way that's consistent with our philosophy, then that will lead to financial success and a happy retirement. We do that in a lot of different ways, but that is the headline version of what we're about and the mission that we have.
And I love that summary. I like things that are easy to understand. And I think that's a very easy to understand mission. And I spent 6.5 years in a previous life in financial services. I did a tour of duty at Goldman Sachs. And so I know the financial services, fairly well. And when I think of Vanguard, just like a couple of things immediately come to mind, like performance, like high performing products came to mind for me. Another thing that came to mind was stability. It is like been a rock in the financial services industry for a long time now. And, I believe with, sustaining that kind of level of success, you have to be getting something right when it comes to culture. And one of the interesting things that came up in our prep was that, you have a culture of long tenure. So people that work at Vanguard like working at Vanguard, they stay at Vanguard, they develop, they move into new roles. And, it could be 20, 25, probably more than that, the numbers that I took away from our prep. And I believe you brought in, usually that culture is sustained by you have cultural giants and succession planning, but you brought in a new CEO in 2024, someone that probably changed things up a little bit. There's probably a very specific game plan when he joined the company, and he came in from outside. And so that also, it's like introducing an external ingredient into the perfect recipe. It's like, how do you, hopefully improve the recipe, but not, damage it. And so, tell us a little bit more about that time frame and, some of the things that have changed since bringing in your first CEO from the outside.
One of my favorite webinars from 2025 was about leave. And this was like a month or two post baby being born, so it was really relevant to me at the time. And we talked about how leave is usually put into 3 buckets. Number 1, the compliance and pay side that you have to get right. Number 2, the business continuity side, so coverage, managers, the return to work plan. And 3, the very real human stuff that's happening at home that shapes how people show up. This couldn't have hit harder for me and Steven. We've both recently added little ones to the family, and it served as a reminder of how complex leave can be, even on a tiny team like ours. Most companies focus almost entirely on that first bucket, but Tilt is built for all 3. Tilt is a leave experience platform that manages all types of leave, from FMLA and PFL to everything in between, with role-based visibility for HR, managers, and employees. They create personalized leave plans so that people know what's happening, what's next, and how they're supported throughout the entire journey. Behind the scenes, Tilt's AI-powered technology automates the admin, keeping everybody aligned, ensuring accurate pay, and turning compliance into a clear, trusted process, so HR teams can focus on the human moments that actually define culture. If you want leave to feel less like spreadsheets and more like clarity and care, check out Tilt at hellotilt.com/MPL. That's hellotilt.com/MPL.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I remember when that news broke and being in financial service, it was really big news to the points that you're raising. Like it was very big news because of our culture and our legacy about growing our own and promoting from within, which we do a ton. In this particular case, I think Salim's mandate is really about accelerating our growth and innovation. And you can imagine how meticulous the board was in the search to ensure that from a technical skill perspective, Salim brought those capabilities, but equally, if not more important, was the culture fit. And I will say, and I hope I can get a pass because this sounds like I'm totally playing up to my boss, but having worked here over the last year with him, he has done an amazing job I think before he joined Vanguard, I think he was a student of Vanguard. And since being part of Vanguard, he steeps all of our conversations in our history, our founding. We have a history center for our founder, Jack Bogle, and he's read. There are tons of handwritten notes from Jack, his speeches, his videos. And so he really, really understands the roots of the company. Both he and I know he did this when he joined. I had the privilege of doing this when I joined. But we actually had the privilege of spending time with every living past CEO of Vanguard. So I was just felt like I was living like a dream. I'm sitting here talking with the person that took over from Jack Bogle, Jack Brennan. I'm talking with the person that took over from Jack Brennan, a person by the name of Bill McNabb. Tim Buckley took over from Bill McNabb, and Salim took over from Tim. And so being able to start the journey off with the grounding of how is this place run? What are the areas that we really have to work hard to preserve? And frankly, every one of those former CEOs had ideas about where we need to focus, where we need to double down, et cetera. And so that really laid the foundation for Salim doing, I think, an incredible job of laying the expectation that we're going to work really hard to preserve all the things that are quite magical about the company. And at the same time, how we have to evolve. And if I can tell a very quick story that was a really cool moment earlier this year, is so we had a leadership offsite. And this topic that we're talking about was squarely on the agenda: our culture, our future, how we bring these things together. And the story that Salim told is the story of the paradox of Theseus. Have you heard about that? Either of you? Yes, no. I can't.
No,
Nope.
I haven't heard of that.
Okay, it's a really quick story.
The paradox of what? Say that
The
again.
paradox of Theseus. So
Theseus, no.
is a Greek ruler. I think he founded Athens, had a hugely successful life and career. And when he passed, to honor him, his people sought to preserve his warship, which is, kind of really interesting comparison with Vanguard having this giant nautical theme. And in preserving his warship over the period of time, essentially every plank on the ship was replaced. And so the paradox is, at what point do you change every plank on the ship but still remain what it originally was? And we use that as kind of a metaphor for the journey that we're on culturally, to basically say, we very much are focused on preserving the richness of Vanguard's culture. And there is a deep, rich culture across the firm globally. And at the same time, there's an acknowledgement that, competition's pretty fierce. We've got AI coming on board. There's an acknowledgement that we have to change. So the work that we're focused on is making those changes, but in a very thoughtful way, with an eye on preserving the things that have really compelled us to be as successful as we've been over the last 50 years.
And so you mentioned that when they were looking for a new CEO, they wanted somebody that, was going to, maybe you said Salim's mandate was accelerating growth and innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And so they hire Salim, and a few months go by and they decide, all right, we're going to bring in a new CHRO. How do you as a Lego piece, how did you fit into that picture? What did this look like during the interview process? And then when you started, how did you start to translate that vision into, the work that you're now doing on the HR team?
Yeah, I mean, so throughout the interview process, as you can imagine, it was pretty rigorous. There was definitely a lot of person-to-person interviews. There was a pretty rigorous psychometric assessment process. A lot of focus on aligning culture. But as both of you know, I mean, given the number of interviews you've done with CHROs, part of this role is also being philosophically aligned with and having strong chemistry with the CEO in order to work together and with the senior team to do the things that we need to do to serve our client. And so as we worked through the process, it all felt like it fit very well. I would say personally, when I think about my personal investment philosophy, it is 100% aligned with our investment philosophy at Vanguard. In other words, I do the best that I can to save as much money as I'm able to. I don't like to think about my money. I have a financial advisor. I'm an owner of Vanguard, but I want to put my money away. I want to trust that the products are going to produce results over the long term. And then I do actually look at my results periodically, but I'm trusting that with that long-term view, I'm going to be just fine in retirement. And so with that philosophy, that being philosophically aligned is really the basis for all the work that we have to do. So we're aligned on that. We're very aligned as a senior team on our culture and the way that we think about clients and the way that we understand how crew drive client outcomes and client success. So there's quite a bit of alignment on our senior team, and that enables us to put an agenda together that, Salim came in, and I think one of the early things that he did is we didn't spend a lot of time coming up with a brand new strategy, but we came up with a number of things that were priorities across the enterprise to deliver more value for our client. We're in the process of executing that. And by having that set of enterprise priorities, it's a mechanism for bringing our senior team together, because part of the focus of those priorities is how do we deliver the full value of Vanguard across all of our different businesses, services, and products.
One of the most widely quoted stories that we've referenced from prior guests, a guy named Jackson Lynch, ex Sunnova Energy, ex PepsiCo. Great guy. And he came on and talked a lot about the job of the CHRO and how the CHRO, unlike all of the other executive level positions, is the one job that changes. If you were to ask 10 different CEOs, what is the role of the CHRO? You'll probably get 10 different results. Some of it will be, similar, but it just goes back to your point around the chemistry between the CEO and CHRO. And I believe that's one of the most vital parts of executive change, or if you're looking to really transform a company, you've got to have that alignment. And so, that really resonated with me. And so you mentioned the set of enterprise priorities. Can you share some of these with it? I'm just intrigued by the story. So Salim comes in, he knows that things need to change. There's probably aspects of the culture and people that, were priorities. You were brought in, you've got a great chemistry, great alignment. You probably had some involvement in setting the enterprise priorities with the other leaders, executive leaders. And so can you just share at least some examples of the priorities?
Sure.
And, I'm curious about your process for then how you started translating that into an HR strategy or a people team strategy.
Hey everyone, really quick. I can already tell that this is going to be an episode where you're going to want to take a lot of notes. And that's kind of a pain in the butt when you're casually listening. So we have made it super easy for you. And we've turned the entire episode into a downloadable PDF so that you can enjoy the conversation and grab the notes later. The link is in the description below. So go grab that before you forget. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah, sure. So the couple that come to mind are, if you look back at our history, we've had enormous success delivering a ton of value to around 50 million. Currently, we have about 50 million investors. And that has been done, if you look at our portfolio split, it is heavily weighted towards index investing. You know, Jack Bogle created that investment vehicle, had a lot of belief in it, and there was a lot of pushback in the industry around it. And it turns out to be exactly aligned with his vision around this being a really powerful mechanism to enable people to achieve financial success. Our business model is so unique in that, number one, we only have the people that are our fund investors are also our owners. And if you think about it,
Okay.
so earlier this year, specific example, I think it was in February, we went out to our investor owners, and we said, hey, we were able to work together as an organization to deliver good financial performance, continue to get economies of scale out of our business. And as a result of that, we are going to reduce your fees by $350 million. So literally going to customers and saying, your fees are X. Next time, it's going to be X minus $350 million across our whole fund complex.
Wow.
Exactly. And so that is a pretty magical thing, especially in a world where everything's getting more expensive. And so when we think about the priorities for the firm, it's things like, how do we take that model and apply it to potentially other categories of financial services? You saw, I think about a year ago, we made an announcement to pursue that, which is the announcement that we made was standing up a new division called Advice and Wealth Management. We brought in a new leader, excellent leader, former Fidelity executive, who came in and is standing up that division as a channel for figuring out how we bring more democratization to advice and wealth management, which you probably both know. If you look at profit pools in financial services, it's no surprise why many financial services firms orient to advice and wealth management, because that's where the heaviest margins are. And businesses like that are prime for us to come in and bring the Vanguard effect, which is millions and millions of people need advice. They need financial advice. It is expensive to deliver that advice. It's very profitable for companies to provide that service to people that can afford it. But part of what we're about from a mission perspective is bringing those services to as many investors as possible, ideally everyone. And so that's a really good example of one of our priorities, is to put the gas pedal down on delivering that value and disrupting that channel of financial services. Another one, which will not be a surprise to either of you, is really being clear about how we lever advanced technologies that are coming online to do what I just mentioned. So how do we think about artificial intelligence as a mechanism for enabling the democratization of the services and products that we provide to our clients, as well as how do we think about that technology to help our crew become more productive? Because, when I talked about that $350 million fee reduction, it's a wonderful, magical thing. But from a business model perspective, that $350 million comes kind of right off the top or bottom line. So every single year, we have to work together as an organization to get more efficient and effective so that we can continue to deliver those fee reductions and deliver that value to clients.
So exciting. It was like 23 minutes and change before the topic of AI came up. That is great.
Yeah, it might be a record for us the last couple months.
But this is so exciting. New CEO, new head of your people function. There's probably other news that exists, but all this stability, talent, long tenured talent at the company, you have business expansion, you're looking to increase, like really kind of blow the hinges off your total available market by getting the products that you so successfully and profitably deliver to as many people as you possibly can. And it feels like this has never been needed more. Like, I don't know anyone who isn't struggling with personal finances or just wealth creation and management. And so on top of all this, you're also about to celebrate 50 years, or you're celebrating 50 years. Yes. Okay. You also are navigating massive shifts. You said it very calmly, advanced technologies. And because a lot of the people we interview there's like a clear, not that you don't have a sense of urgency, but there's like almost panic mode, like advanced technologies. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about how you're celebrating 50 years at Vanguard and celebrating these, the culture that is probably in so many ways the same Vanguard you've always been. But you're also celebrating a lot of news, and the writing's on the wall. The next 50 years are probably going to look a lot different 100%. Than the last 50 years looked for the company. Yeah. And so how do you balance that in a way that is motivating and exciting when you have these conversations with your people? Like, how do you balance all of these things as an HR leader? Because that's such an important skill. And in the last week, I have seen so many LinkedIn posts about storytelling. Like, I need storytelling training, or like, that's the one part that I can't do with GPT. And so I believe the future HR leader is one that's technically savvy, but is also a great storyteller. And that's like, those two things you wouldn't naturally think are together. So I'm just curious, like, how does that fit into your portfolio of skills, you and the team, and how are you managing all of these things? It sometimes could seem, somewhat conflicting, messages. I'm just curious how y'all manage that.
We did a webinar recently on how HR teams are actually using AI, and we had people like Brandon Samut on there from Zapier, and we kept coming back to the same idea. AI only matters if it makes insights usable. And that's exactly what ChartHop has built with AskChartHop. Instead of having to dig through spreadsheets or click through a maze of filters, you can literally type a question and get the answer that you want instantly. Whether that's org charts, churn risk, hiring timelines, pay equity views, headcount plans, all of that can be generated in seconds. When Steven and I saw this live at HR Tech, we were genuinely blown away. I could totally see this being great for an HR leader who needs quick help to prepare for a board report or has to answer a question that comes up at their next C-suite meeting. Like, what better superpower could a people leader have? And so if you've been looking for something like this and you want to see what it looks like in real life, you can try AskChartHop at charthop.com/AI. That's charthop.com/AI.
Yeah, so the first thing, and we're super excited and proud about this, is one of the things our HR organization did globally this year is we began to reposition the purpose of the function. And the repurposing has to do with basically, and it's not a branding exercise, but it is very much declaring that HR's function is to enable how work gets done for clients. And what that means is we have to play a really important role in understanding the work that we do in service of clients, what it takes at a very detailed task level to do that work, think through both how that work gets done in terms of human and agentic, and where that work gets done. So, you probably saw in the news earlier this year that, we stood up a global value center in Hyderabad, India, as one of the channels, which is really a talent access play, one of the channels for working through that kind of decision tree. And we think that is a very forward view as far as the purpose of HR and organizations on a go-forward basis. And it has everything to do with just understanding what it takes to get work done and then finding the most effective channel to do that work. As it relates to our crew, so a couple things. And we certainly, as a leadership team, for sure, Salim, has an appropriate level of urgency around understanding how transformative AI and other advanced technologies are going to be for our clients and for our crew. We invest literally as a company, we invest billions of dollars a year in technology, and we have provided full company access to a number of modern AI platforms, providing training to crew, creating space for crew to practice using the technology, encouraging and sharing, setting up small communities of folks that really figure out how to take the technology and apply it to their work, so that the first level of kind of engagement with the technology is, how can I use this to make my work better? We also kind of embrace this notion of control the controllables. There's so many, and you spend your time talking with folks that are deep in this space, and there's so many questions that are not answered. And so our strategy is focused on, let's control what we can control, which is encouraging our crew to get as fluent and expert at using the technologies that are available as possible. When we talk about culture, I think we very much subscribe to open and transparent conversation about the things that are happening in the world and how we're going to lever those things in order to serve clients. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but there's a lot of active dialogue with our crew around engaging actively in what's happening. And I personally don't think that, when we hear things like, well, we have to upskill our workforce, I think that's true in one sense, but in another sense, how that upskilling is going to happen is going to be very much about experimentation, using the tools on it, failing, figuring out how things can get better, getting better at task level automation in order to provide that individual improvement. It's not going to be a general kind of go to an AI training program and then kind of go back to work. I don't think that's how it's going to play out. And it's not how it's playing out as much at Vanguard.
I'd agree with that. And something I heard the other day that I can't get out of my mind is and you can apply this to any company. So Google or OpenAI or Anthropic were a podcast company. How would they run their company? If Google, Anthropic, or OpenAI were a financial services company, how would they run their company? And what I'm hearing is this is sort of the transition that the company is trying to make. Right. So in order to, deliver financial advice to everyone, to all 50 million people that are using Vanguard, you have to figure out how to do it the same way that an Anthropic would do it, sure, or a Google.
Well, and the interesting, just to pile on, Daniel, I think what the average person that has not worked in financial services, the companies like Vanguard are as much technology companies nowadays as 100%. They are financial advisors, and because of everything that's already happened. And so I think that is a great comparison, comparing yourself to Google, even in Vanguard's case, or, Anthropic or whomever, I think is a great way of looking at it.
Yeah. And so I think it makes total sense, repurpose the function or reposition the function to truly understanding how the work's getting done. Yep. And so my question is how many employees does Vanguard have?
Around 20,000.
For 20,000 employees, how do you do this workflow audit or task audit across 20,000 employees to truly understand the work? What does that even look like?
Yeah.
And how does the HR team help out with that?
Well, so the first thing is that we literally, our HR leadership team had a conversation today, and we're working with the company I won't name that has an expertise in this space that understands, I wouldn't say every single job at a task level, but definitely understands most jobs in financial service at a 70% accuracy level about task level work as a financial advisor or as a contact center person. So it starts with appreciating the work that has to get done, which we've talked about. The next thing is thinking through the priority, because if we went out and said, hey, we have to process map or task map every single job in the company, that becomes so heavy, it probably dies under its own weight. So we have to apply a discipline on which of the roles in the organization would doing that which would benefit the most from taking that kind of an approach. And then having part of the culture evolution is creating an even higher degree of experimentation around admiring issues and problems. Like, okay, like let's take this, we've got 70%, let's take a shot at closing that gap, maybe getting our task level understanding to 85, 90%. And then let's figure out how we can take the technologies that are available or take advantage of skills in our different markets to get that job done as effectively and efficiently as possible. And our expectation is by doing that, we'll start to create a bit of a momentum in the organization around this is how we have to think about the work that we're getting done. I think that you all have been in the game a long time, and I think you would probably agree with what I'm about to say, which is, in most organizations, strategic workforce planning has been around for a really long time. Most companies don't do it well at all. One of the reasons they don't do it well at all is because it's really hard and tedious and expensive to do. Our view is building an organizational capability around strategic workforce planning is a giant enabler of how the future is going to play out in terms of working through that decision tree of what work do we have to do, how does it get done, where does it have to get done.
And so what I'm hearing a little in this is Agile, like forming a minimal viable product or form a hypothesis, and around that, let's get roughly there. We don't need to be waterfall in our approach and get 100% of the requirements down. Like, let's get like the core set of common elements and let's start working through that first. And I think that's so smart. I can't remember who posted it, but it was a post on LinkedIn that was like, we went through this exercise, we documented, all of the inefficient processes, the manual processes, and then we followed that documentation. And this was in payroll. And we tested out initially, and we just did like, a small batch of tests. And where that led us was a complete disaster, because what that documentation did not include were all the workarounds that if you didn't go down the happy path, there were all these other things that the payroll team had to do. And so they optimized for happy path. They then scaled that, and then it was like a total disaster. And I do think that there is an element that, like, no matter how well you document and how like getting, the effort to get to 99% isn't going to necessarily, documentation won't necessarily drive any better results. And so I love that kind of, if I'm hearing you correct, like some degree of Agile principles in just the 100%. Way you're thinking.
Yeah, it's really like creating, and we talked about culture as a strategy. It's creating a culture that encourages that mindset. It encourages an AI first mindset, meaning that if you have to do anything, your first thought, the first filter in your mind is, how do I lever one of the platforms to get this done? How do I engage with the technology to help me get this done in a way that is going to be excellent for my business partner and fast? And then if it comes out, as you all know, because I'm sure you play around with the Frontier Lab products and platforms, is getting into the habit of, just because the AI gives you an answer, you can iterate with it and tweak it and keep going back and getting to that place where the system itself learns from you, from the questions that you're asking, and gets better. And ultimately, we think that that's going to be a big enabler of a pretty significant lift for our crew on the productivity side.
And so let's dig a little more into culture. I think you literally just touched on probably one of the biggest themes coming out of MPL Live Austin last week. The topic was change management in an AI powered workplace. I'm paraphrasing, but something to that effect.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest kind of question marks or kind of flags, takeaways, is that there's a huge lack of trust, in just like the general workforce around AI. And there's like fear of getting caught. doing something you shouldn't be doing. There is a fear of jumping in because the opportunity cost of my time, or maybe there's a fear of making yourself redundant. There are all these fears that are tied into this. And what we kept hearing time and time again is that it really starts on top, and to build the trust. And we also interviewed Pat Lencioni like a couple of weeks ago, and got a great crash course on the importance of trust in driving a healthy culture. And so, how have y'all approached practicing just leading the charge and really practicing what you preach, which is like, hey, y'all, it's okay to fail. It's okay. In fact, we want you to do this. But how have you embodied that at kind of the HR, the people team, ELT level?
One quick story before we get back to the episode. You may have seen that Grok recently made the news with a $20 billion agreement with NVIDIA. And one of the reasons that they've been able to move so quickly is how they support their leadership team. Instead of overloading their people team or expecting execs to manage everything themselves, Grok built a dedicated executive assistant team with a mix of in-house EAs and more than 10 executive assistants from Viva. Viva manages the EA team from end to end, from hiring and matching to training and security, so that leaders can stay focused on delegating and making decisions. And according to their CEO, the impact shows up fast. Jonathan Ross from Grok said, "My Viva EA is the first executive assistant I've ever had who's as obsessed with the details and getting things right as I am." So if you're thinking about how you can help yourself or your leadership team operate at a higher level, go book a conversation with Viva. Just go to execviva.com/MPL. That's execviva.com/MPL, or you can click the link in the show notes below.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would share, which is not revolutionary, is doing that kind of work well takes a lot of effort and time. So one of the answers to the question is, if we think about our senior leaders, we spend a lot of time out with our crew where the crew are. We do a lot of roundtable sessions where we just get together with all different levels of the organization to understand what's going on and their perspective. We set expectations. So like I spend a huge portion of my time out in our markets with crew having conversations like this. And part of my talk track on change management is helping crew have a realistic expectation on how change is going to occur in the organization going forward. In other words, change management, in my view, the outcome of change management isn't happiness, right? It's accepting how things are. And one of my personal mantras is this relationship between, it's a formula that I use, and the formula is satisfaction is equal to expectations over actuals. So if we spend a lot of time managing expectations, like for change, this is a truism that like today is the slowest pace and volume that change will ever be. And getting people to accept that, because if you don't accept that, then you live with a gap between how things actually are and what you expect them to be like. And, it creates a dissonance that isn't productive. So when we talk about change management, it's mostly about enabling the recognition of how things are and how they will likely be. And then going back to one of the things I mentioned earlier, which is this notion of enabling crew to control the controllables. And what are the things, if we accept the environment the way it is, what can we do to participate in the change that's happening? And then it is, as a company, are we enabling that through training, creating time for people to practice, encouraging that agile culture of, create an MVP, iterate on it, get it not into production. I mean, obviously, and then to be very clear, we serve millions of clients. We manage trillions of dollars in assets. And that is very, very serious business as far as risk and controls are concerned. So, agile is great, but customer safety, risk management, controls for our business is first priority. But there's even then a way to engage with the technology in service of our customers using some of those mindsets. We just have to be extra careful for things that go outside of the Vanguard ecosystem.
I'm going to have to write down your definition of satisfaction and have it hanging in my office or something. So say that again. Satisfaction equals
is equal to expectations over actuals.
Okay. I'm never going to forget that.
It is so, tell you, it is like I spend so much of my time calibrating my expectations when something is happening. And I just run it through that little formula and it makes sense. And so if I'm disappointed in something, it's normally because there's a gap between those two things.
Well, the
I
other
love that.
thing is like accept the reality of your environment, or I forget what I'm misquoting that also, but it's
Yeah,
like
change
when you
management is accepting the
here's
reality.
the thing. AI is here and it's not going away. The genie is out of the bottle. We have talked about this for years now. Like I remember when we were talking about it for weeks and months, but it's been years.
Yep.
And so when you accept that and you allow yourself to kind of view things through that lens, for me, in my experience, like you begin to see things a little differently and you can start to see things in a more positive light or just different to when you're just rooted in like, this is something, I don't know if I really agree with this. And I do have all these concerns about it, but again, that's going to take you to this negative mindset. And so I like that clip. Also, as you were talking, I marked this for a clippable moment.
Okay.
And so you briefly mentioned training, development. And I think in our prep call, we talked about how 35% of Vanguard's leaders go through development programs each year. And so that's a huge investment for the company.
Yep.
And I think there were 2 signature programs that were mentioned, one for experienced leaders and then another one for first-time people managers.
Yep.
Can you walk us through how each of these works?
Yeah, I mean, I can. So the two programs that you're talking about, one is called the Leadership Experience and one is called the Emerging Leader Development Program. They're actually they're slightly targeted at different audiences. The Emerging Leader Development Program is mostly focused on our earlier career crew that aspire to be leaders in a licensed job. Because a lot of our workers, a lot of our crew have to have licenses in order to practice products and services and advice and that kind of stuff. So they're both targeted at earlier career crew who have high potential and an interest in becoming leaders. The other one is more for non-licensed crew who have the same interest. And one of the differences between the two is in the ELDP program, so the Emerging Leader Development Program, that is a rotational program. So it's kind of like a little bit like the classic management associate program where we go through a vetting and application process. We hire classes of crew to participate in the program. It runs over a couple years, and in that multi-year process, you would rotate through lots of different parts of the organization. And then when you're fit and you have lots of different experiences in functions, in businesses, and at the end of that process, you rotate into a permanent job. The Leadership Experience program is more of a classic, say, entry level, first time you're a person who has both the aptitude and interest in leading people. And so it's the work that we do to enable you with mostly management skills, I would say, a little bit less on leadership. And then outside of those two programs, we have a number of offers for different levels of leadership development, up to and including, we make a huge investment sending mid to upper career leaders through MBA programs, accelerated executive development at top schools and that kind of. If I have a minute, one thing I'd love to share that we're super excited about is, remember when I talked about having the opportunity to spend time with some of our former CEOs at Vanguard? One of those CEOs was a guy by the name of Bill McNabb. And each of our CEOs, including Jack Bogle, has presided over kind of an era in our history. And, Salim coming in 2024, it's really the beginning of another era for Vanguard. But in the conversation that I had with Bill McNabb, one of the things that struck me about his era of leadership was he really had a lot of conviction and natural passion on cultural development and leadership development. And I would say over time, Vanguard has, like many companies, kind of succumbed to the attraction of online learning. Like we have subscriptions to tons of different learning platforms. There are literally thousands of courses that our crew can take. And those are all good things. But what they're not as great at is actually creating competency for people. You can go on, you look at a video, you get some information. not really tested on it. You don't really have to demonstrate that you actually learn the skill that you're supposed to learn. So earlier this year, we created a new portfolio on our HR leadership team that combines leadership development, culture enablement, and DEI together as a portfolio. And there's a leader on my team who is charged with basically creating the next generation of our leadership development platform that does produce the competence in a demonstrable way. And I use my experience in the military as the basis for that. So, like in the military, I mentioned this earlier that the military doesn't ask people to do something that they don't train you to do, that you don't demonstrate that you can do, literally with someone, kind of standing over your back with a clipboard, watching you demonstrate the skill. We probably won't be able to afford that level of rigor, but conceptually, we're going to ratchet our investment in leadership development up to a completely different level, and we have the full support of our senior team and the board to do it.
Daniel has heard me for probably a 2-year period talk about how in the SaaS era, we failed our employees with this notion of learning at scale. And I get it. Like classroom-based learning, like it's cost prohibitive, right? But that doesn't mean that we need to abandon it in all use cases and cram diluted learning platforms to our employees. I'm not saying Vanguard did this. I'm just saying as a whole, I think the business world, we failed our people. And I think it was clear in survey results, there's not enough development opportunities. Right. There's not enough training. I'm not getting what I need in terms of continuing education. So I love that you're going back to your roots of culture and leadership development. And I think this is what it's investments like this that will separate Vanguard from your competitors. And my bet is that this is going to continue. I think a couple of things that were swirling in my mind is like in these rotational programs, like, and maybe y'all are already thinking about it, at least at the firms I worked for, they were typically like functional areas. So like bankers did the banking, rotational program, and people team did the people team. Would it be cool if there was like an AI functional area? And so you have someone who has like an AI hat on that is like rotating from business unit to business unit, understanding, okay, this is what our client support team is doing, and this is what the investment team is doing with. Anyhow, I don't know. Maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. Before we're running short on time, and there's another area just right up there with learning that I think we failed our people, and that is in the managerial ranks. And one of the things that I heard, in the prep notes is that while many companies are flattening middle management, that just seems to be like the executive team move, like new CFO, like boom, we got to flatten, we got to reduce the number of managers that we have here. Y'all are doing the opposite. And through this curriculum that you've developed and through looking at how AI might help you build up that layer, you're actually not trying to flatten your managerial ranks. And I think that's so smart, just like making that investment on L&D and leadership development. So tell us a little bit about that decision, that executive decision to invest in your middle manager ranks rather than try to flatten this segment of your workforce.
Yeah, I would say what you said a little bit differently. So if you think about our business model, we, as part of our mission, we are called to figure out ways to operate the business as effectively and efficiently as possible, in order to fuel the engine that we've created to continuously deliver fee reductions and more value for our clients. And so, sorry about that. So we do focus quite a bit on efficiency and effect. I wouldn't say we're growing our middle management ranks. What I would say it a little differently, and that would be we're definitely investing heavy in leadership development and ensuring that the managers that we have on the team are very effective and demonstrably effective at what they do. So I think that's important. And then another thing that, as we were talking about, the AI rotation idea that came into my mind is the notion that, when we think about one of the benefits of encouraging crew to engage actively in the application of AI from a productivity perspective, one of the things that productivity does is it creates a time dividend. And the time dividend allows us to then conduct the training in the way that we believe we need to in order to create the competency that we need to lead the company into the future. It's a little bit of a tweak on the angle of the question, but I would say we are very interested and focused in driving effectiveness and efficiency across the organization, but don't have a strategy to thin out middle management. We want to invest in the managers that we have and ensure that the work that they are doing that is worthy, that we're making sure that they're able to do it as effectively as possible.
I love how you explain that. So by making people more productive, you create a time dividend so you can conduct the training the way it needs to be done. And I had a similar reaction to Stephen on your comment about, online learning and how that may have not been delivering the competencies that people were looking to drive with their employees the last 10-ish years or however long it's been.
Yeah.
I feel like some of the most valuable things that I've learned in my career have actually been from Stephen, but those learnings came from these like official training programs that he was put in during his time at Ernst & Young or Goldman Sachs. And sometimes I wonder, like, what would I have done in my career if I had been in one of these rotational programs or had like that legit, like, what do you guys call it, leadership experience program?
Yeah.
I feel like there's nothing that's more valuable than that. And sorry, Stephen, I feel like you're about to jump in.
No, I was going to say, I mean, it's so important. And I think, I can empathize with employees when I hear the feedback that, HR leaders share with us, because, it's valid. That being said, in today's era, the focus is on productivity, the focus is on efficiency, the focus is on shareholder value. And, it's not easy. It's not easy to manage all. Sometimes there are conflicting priorities. Totally. And so that's just a harsh reality of business. But yeah, it can be a game changer for your talent.
We think it will be. It is a little bit of a back to the future strategy. It is different. We're blessed in a way in that we're not conflicted between serving clients and serving shareholders. Our clients are our owners. One of my favorite quotes from Salim, I probably won't get this exactly right, but the essence of it is, our mission is about delivering value to clients as opposed to extracting value from them. And I think about that every single day when we do our work. That's a powerful concept.
And say that one more time, because I'm gonna write that one down too.
So our mission is about delivering value to clients as opposed to extracting value from them.
I love that. There's this guy
and we're unique in that way, to be clear. Like we have a mutual business structure. It is totally unique in the industry. And that business model enables us to not just say that, but we have I think, the fee reduction I mentioned earlier today, I want to say that was like 2,000th time we've reduced fees for clients.
Jeez.
And so it's nice to say those things, but they are not platitudes at Vanguard.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's this guy I follow on LinkedIn that talks a lot about creating regenerative companies instead of extractive companies. And I feel like that's what you guys are building.
Yeah, it's similar.
And so we always come to this point where we have to move to rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
I feel like we could keep going for another hour. Question 1. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to somebody starting in HR today?
Become an expert at applying advanced technologies to your work.
Timely and advice I could get behind. Next question. If your team gave you a superpower nickname, what would it be?
Yeah, that is a tricky one. It probably has something to do with, I work really hard to kind of be a future whisperer. It doesn't roll off the tongue, but I spend a lot of time thinking about how things are going to play out in the future, and then we work together as a team to both our senior leadership team as well as our HR team to bring those things to truth.
The futurist. How about that?
Yeah.
Future man.
Well, I can
Future
also
man.
I can kind of picture like the costume, like there's like a little like logo where
it would be different. Like you don't want to have like a big Superman costume with a big F on your. I don't think that would work.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Next question: if you could steal one strategy from another company Could be from an HR team. It could be just any strategy.
Yeah.
What would it be?
I wouldn't call it stealing, but one talent strategy that we are attracted to and are implementing is the notion of talent density, which is figuring out the talent that you need, paying the talent that you need as competitively as possible, and doing that in a way that the idea is almost having, I don't want to say a minimal level of talent, but having an appropriate level of talent for what you need to do, and err on the side of paying less talent more competitive.
Love that also. Last question. And this is a way that we've been able to get so many great guests on the show, is who, if there's someone that you feel really deserves the spotlight in the people space and in the HR world, like who would that be? Who should we have on the show?
That is an excellent question. The person that immediately came to mind, I don't know if you know Larry Emond.
No?
Yeah, so Larry Emond, he works at Modern Executive Solutions. And I've been a friend of and colleague of Larry's for a long time. He spent most of his career at Gallup, and he is incredibly well connected in the CHRO community, number one. And number two, he is one of the deepest leaders and executives I've seen in the HR community that is on the front edge of HR specific AI technologies that are coming online.
I'm going to go find his LinkedIn right now and go connect with him. He sounds like he'd be a great addition.
He is
to the
a
podcast.
font of knowledge, and I'm pretty sure he would be happy to spend some time on the show, because it's a great show. It's a great platform, but he's the real deal.
All right. Final tradition on the show. It's something that we call one word or phrase close. Anything that's coming to mind for you as we wrap up this episode?
I'm just going to say what I thought, and that is buckle up.
Ooh,
nice.
Steven?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Future Man. I think that said it. That said everything I needed to hear right there.
Great.
I'm gonna go with more of a phrase. Okay. Satisfaction equals expectations over actuals.
Nice. Very nice. Well, Jon, thank you so much. We're a little over time, so we'll let you we'll wrap this up. Appreciate it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having a little fun with us. We went off script a little bit. I hope your PR, the comms team is okay with that, but it's been an absolute joy. And Daniel's right. I feel like we could have gone a couple of hours on this.
I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Congratulations on the success. And Daniel, I think you mentioned earlier about, like, I wonder what would happen if I went through the rotational program, kind of like Steven had the opportunity to go through. And what I was thinking in my mind is, yeah, you might be like a co-founder of a really great platform and media company.
Maybe.
You could have a future.
Oh my God.
So well done.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Bye guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.